In 1980, dozens of children suddenly collapsed during a marching band event in a quiet English village. The symptoms were real, but the cause was never found, leading to theories of toxins, radio waves, aliens, and more. Today, we investigate the mysterious Hollinwell Incident. This is Red Web. Welcome back, Task Force, to another episode of Red Web, the podcast all about unsolved mysteries, true crime, and the paranormal. I am your resident mystery enthusiast, Trevor Collins, and joining me hearing this case for the very first time, Alfredo Diaz.
Very interesting incident we have here on our hands, but also validated.
Yes.
So I think that's the key thing I took away from that. Man, it could be a number of things. It really could. A whole frequencies that mess with people's brains, that's not far-fetched at all. They have a bunch. They have a whole chart, like a manual of just this frequency does this to a human, does that to a human, this frequency does this.
Yeah.
So yeah, diabolical if you're testing out a marching band.
Right. Let's blast these kids here with this. Maybe we can make some superheroes out of this radio wave blast these kids.
Yeah, that's a little intense. So I'm very interested to see what happens. Also, you mentioned aliens. Just wild if I don't know what, aliens just swooped down real quick, blasted a band, and then just took notes and then dipped. Like
a little drive-by, blast them with a little confusion, knock them out, and then leave.
All right, hit them with it.
Yeah,
and then
a little boom bop.
Go, 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 go. They all dropped.
Listen, there's something about the unknown, the unexplained, that the people always got to bring an alien into the picture. It's not always a robust theory, but we got to mention it when it's on the table. There's not a whole lot to be said, but there's an element there. We got to talk about it. We'll talk about, the background of this incident because it was real. This did happen, and it happened suddenly across this one event. And there are a few cases that happened a few days after. But really, this particular case will live in the theories and conspiracies behind it. What happened? Because we know something happened. Police, investigators got their hands in, started to investigate all these different theories. And I think that's the most confusing part, is that so many of these theories are realistic, actually give you a proper answer. And then it turns out, based on how everything went that day, that it was debunked. And so how can you debunk all the things that make sense and have no answers left? It's just so weird.
Yeah. It's very, very weird.
Yeah. But I do love the idea of somewhere in the government, there's a room, right? We always picture a conspiracy board with the red string strewn all over the place. Maybe their theories have gotten so convoluted that the webs start to leap off the board onto a board across the room. And so it's a three-dimensional web. You're like, there's just one guy in there with a bunch of cigarettes and he's just, he doesn't know what to
smoking.
Do. Yeah.
Dude, you're off the deep end at that point.
He's got it all.
If you have strings on a board going to another board, come on. At that point, how much is reaching,
Right. Oh, all of it. All of it from the beginning, but I love it. All right, now as we dive into this case, as always, I want to give a huge shout out to our supportive task force members over at redwebpod.com. Of course, we got this week's Buff Scientist of the Week. We got Zakeem Johnson. And, of course, Alfredo's hit list, the Squonks. We all love them, but he wants to melt them. We got Azrael, Heather Stallcup, Clint from PS3, and Zarathustra, just to name a few. They're all scurrying now through the hallways. Follow the puddles.
I'm telling you, man. I'm saying. And look, now that we had, our March Mystery Madness, and there's a lot of you out there that took the Squonks out. You chose otherwise. So maybe you're built for this.
Listen, he's making a divide. You are either against the Squonks or you are for the Squonks. We all love the Squonks, but some of us just like them in a different form, the puddle form. But anyway, there's so much happening over at redwebpod.com. Head over there to check it out. Support us directly. We have weekly stuff happening at this point. Break Room is a new show heading your way every month. Come join the conversation. All that said, go check it out. We are diving into the Hollinwell Incident. So, Fredo, this took place on July 13th, 1980. There were 11 marching bands from across the East Midlands region of England, and they all gathered in Kirkby in Ashfield for the annual event called the Hollinwell Show. So Kirkby in Ashfield is about 200 kilometers or 120 miles north of London. And that day, there were around 500 students. So a lot of people in play, a lot of parents, and some of them were as young as 7 years old. They began arriving at Hollinwell Showground for the 9 a.m. start time. Now, at the beginning of the competition, the judges would inspect each school's members, and the students would stand at attention for this. So they would assess like how their ranks looked, what their outfits were, basically just doing a broad assessment so we can kind of judge them all together. But around 10:30 a.m., these inspections were still going on. So an hour and a half. I want to earmark that.
500 students, you said?
About 500 students. Yeah, more than.
That's a lot depending on how deep the inspection is. Dude, it sounds kind of surface level in terms of just like uniform. I don't know if they're inspecting like equipment or anything like that, but 500 can be cumbersome.
500 is a lot to go through, but as a kid, I did a summer camp at Culver, Indiana. It was a wonderful time, but there was a military school aspect to that. And so every Sunday we would do parades and you have to stand at attention, sometimes in the heat for quite some time. So let me tell you, as a child, even at 7 years old is as young as they get here,
right?
To stand still, hands down, or holding an instrument, whatever it is, for an hour and a half is a lot to think about. I'm already kind of forecasting my theory on what's happening here.
Yeah, but, and I'm picking up what you're putting down, okay? Because like this sounds like, I don't know, this sounds more difficult than some Survivor challenges. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And when you're entering that realm and you're entering it with kids, survivors with adults.
Yeah.
Like I can see how maybe a ton of them just kind of fell to the ground, passed out. How hot was this day?
I did look into that, and I don't have the specific historical data for that particular day. There's just not a lot of information around 1980 and July specifically, but on average, looking at July in England, the temperatures are honestly not too bad. They have some humid days, some hot days, that is true. This is the dead of summer, but historically, in temperatures being of Fahrenheit, I believe it's pushing 70 on average. And nothing in any of the research that we saw indicated that this was a particularly blustery hot day. This was pretty average, but I love where your head's at, though, because that's kind of where my gut went. But none of the theories really talk about, heat stroke or anything like that. Yeah.
And I don't know if this is jumping the gun or anything like that, but also I'm assuming since, there were kids there, I'm assuming there's parents that went and attended, which I'm also assuming there's siblings that attended as well. So I'm also curious to see or hear if any of the siblings had issues, because you know what I mean? They're also kids probably in the similar age range, stuff like that. So like, was it just the band members affected?
Wonderful question. Let's continue to explore. It's 10:30 a.m. The inspections are still going on, and this is when students begin collapsing on the field. Now, according to Terry Bingham, one of the adults alongside of one of the marching bands, quote, "We were ready for the display when one or two children collapsed. Then a few more went, and a few more." And as they continued to reflect on the scene at hand as these kids are falling, he almost likens them to bowling pins, saying that they, quote, "fell like 9 pins," end quote. So it started to become very dramatic, as it seems like by all accounts, 1 or 2 children passed out. And from there, it was a domino effect across the field.
Now we talk about like how they felt like bowling pins and dominoes, and the way those fall is that one gets knocked into another.
Sure.
So is that kind of how it panned out, where it started from a section and then that kind of essentially spread, or was it just sporadic and like different pocket areas were happening?
That's a great clarifying question. So it sounded like it's more that they fell just directly to the ground, that they didn't like catch themselves, nor did they fall into one another. It's that it was kind of localized to 1 or 2, and then from across the field, almost maybe within eyesight of one another, they then began to fall.
Interesting.
So it was across the whole field, not like emanating from an epicenter outwards or into one another. Yeah.
Just double clarifying there, because then that would be like a whole new
right. You're like, what happened there?
Yeah, whole can of worms.
Yeah.
Okay.
So of course, soon hereafter, both children and adults begin collapsing on Now, on the field itself, where the marching bands are, but also on the sidelines where the spectators are. One of the affected adults actually went so far as to say, and this was Margaret Palethorpe, one of the parents, she said, quote, "I collapsed and then lost the use of one of my arms." And so I'm trying to figure out through all these accounts, as they are fainting and collapsing, are they fully going unconscious? Are they just falling? And it's really hard to tell. It seems that some people are truly fainting and some people are collapsing maybe out of sort of weakness, but still conscious enough to be like, well, I can't feel my arm or I can't move my arm. And pretty quickly it seemed that more and more children were collapsing, some even as they tried to help up their friends. They're saying, "Oh my gosh, Timmy, you fell." And they themselves fall prey to whatever is happening.
But then also adults too.
And adults. And it doesn't stop there.
In the stands. Like,
yeah.
So now I feel like it's just this infected area.
Exactly. And new symptoms started appearing as people began to vomit. They said they were suffering from sore throats, dizziness, watery eyes, and then general weakness across the body. And less commonly, there were reports of people being inflicted with, like I said before, Mrs. Palethorpe had limbs going numb. Others were saying that there was a metallic taste in their mouths, and in the air, there was this smell of bleach. And so it started with what seemed like just straightforward fainting, things that we can explain from our gut inclinations, right? But then suddenly it really started to spread into, okay, now people are vomiting. Now people are smelling stuff. And it wasn't a shared, like, synonymous symptoms ring. Like, some people felt some things, some people had the taste, some people were vomiting, some people were passing out. So it was just this ultimate collection of odd things happening on the field all at once.
Man, like, is it just some kind of weird fertilizer? It's like on the field.
You're onto something.
Just a like standard chemical that, I mean, like affecting everyone. I mean, it could be a mixture of chemicals.
100%. We're totally going to talk about that. That is one of the leading theories on this particular case. But there's some frustrating elements to that as it was being investigated. So,
because like the numbing of like a limb, the vomiting, those are all things that could be because they inhaled something.
Totally.
A certain, chemical.
Absolutely. I love where your head's at. We're totally going to explore that top to bottom. But the symptoms don't stop here. Enid Holmes, who was a secretary for one of the schools, actually said when reporting on this incident after, she said that she, quote, noticed some children had blebs on their backs and legs, end quote.
What are blebs?
Great question. So blebs, the English have all these fun terms and slang and lingo. I had to look this up myself.
Yeah, I was like, what the heck is a bleb? It doesn't sound good.
I was like, what are these blobs you're talking about? So blebs are a simple way to talk about blisters.
Okay.
Like watery blisters, things like that. Again, ultimately, not every victim experienced every symptom shared across the crowd. Some were fainting, some were vomiting, some had these blebs, etc. And the marching event, of course, had to be called off as many of these victims began needing direct medical attention. So, you were kind of getting at it before, here's the number. In total, 259 children were taken to 4 different hospitals.
Wow.
9 of those children had to stay overnight. And outside of the children, there were 15 adults who suffered from this sudden mysterious sickness, as well as, unfortunately, 2 infants. And it was really hard to figure out the age of these, so it was by one source in particular, the Fortean Times, that we found the ages, but one was 2 weeks old, and one was 3 weeks old. So these were very young babies, also impacted by whatever this was.
Ah, man, it just feels like a chemical.
It does. It really does.
It feels like a chemical because I feel like if it was some type of frequency, then it would knock all the children, or at least a larger amount. Because we're talking about what, 500 and like 260 got affected.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like a definite thing, but I just feel like it might have, especially if it's something like frequency, like they're young. They're all going to be able to essentially hear the same frequency. I doubt any of them are overly exposed to high audio surroundings, right? Getting their eardrums blasted, aging them and whatnot.
Right.
Yeah. And then some of the adults were affected too. Yeah. It seems like more of a chemical thing. That's what I'm leaning towards right now.
Yep. That's one of the popular ones. We'll get into all that, but kind of in closing this background, because there really isn't a whole lot more. There were rumors at the time that even nearby horses were affected by this unexplained illness, but there's not been a lot of evidence to prove this particular point. Additionally, it was reported, again, depending on the source, that on the 16th, just a few days later, 4 workers just a few miles north also collapsed with similar symptoms. All the while, we're talking about these 9 students who had to stay overnight at the hospital. A couple of them, I believe it was like 4 or 5, had to be re-admitted to the hospital because they once again re-experienced these original symptoms even days later. And so there are a few echoes of whatever happened here happening later on in this timeline, whatever it was.
I mean, again, it could be just whatever was in their system wasn't fully flushed out.
Still feels like toxins, right?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. A lot of obvious answers come to mind, right? We've already addressed 2 of the loud ones. I think toxins is certainly one of the leading theories. We'll talk about the wrinkles that show up in the investigation. But of course, like the gut instinct of, okay, is heat stroke to blame? Or is it because these kids are standing for a long period of time? It feels easily understood, but there's a lot of evidence demonstrably debunking these otherwise simple and straightforward theories. So with that, I want to explore all the theories behind this strange affliction and get your thoughts, because there's a few other ones that do uncover some interesting thoughts. But again, they all have wrinkles. So let's dive in. This episode of Red Web is sponsored by Shopify. Task Force, if you've shopped online, I'm just going to say it. Chances are you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. And if you've ever seen that purple Shop Pay button when you're checking out, you know, the one that makes buying so incredibly easy, well, that's also Shopify, baby. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US. From household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started. Shopify gives you the leg up from day one with hundreds of beautiful, ready-to-go templates to express your brand style. Forget about having to code it all yourself. Those templates make it super easy. Tackle all the important tasks in one place, from inventory to payments to analytics and more. Everything you need to run your shop. Spread your brand's word with built-in marketing tools and email tools as well to find and keep new customers, which is incredibly important. And again, that iconic purple Shop Pay button that's used by millions of businesses around the world, well, it is why Shopify is the best converting checkout on the planet, and your customers already love it. I have a lot of experience with Shopify. It has been so easy to set up and use. And in the past, the Red Web store was run by Shopify. So I got that hands-on experience of exactly what they're talking about. And it's very easy and simple to run your business behind it. If you want to see less carts being abandoned, it's time for you to head over to Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/redweb. Go to shopify.com/redweb. Shopify.com/redweb. We'll talk about pesticides in a second, but I want to start with a different type of poisoning. Because as soon as the Hollinwell incident occurred, food poisoning was initially suggested as the possible cause of illness.
It's true, yeah.
Perhaps a treat was handed out to all the students as they entered the field. I know when I played soccer as a youth, people had the orange slices, the Capri Sun, the squeezies, those like plastic beer bottle looking things.
Yep. It's a little twist the top off and suck it down.
You know, oh yeah. That was about 3 sips worth, but it was delicious.
Pure sugar too.
Oh yeah. Listen, you need it after a hard day of soccer. But also people were talking about water on site being contaminated. So once again, I want to talk about the 14 Times. They are a British magazine, and since 1973, they're very similar to Red Web. Yes, they talk about a lot of mysteries, fringe cases, but they pride themselves on having that analytical forward mind. They don't want to just blindly believe all this stuff. They do want to come with at least some level of critique and analysis. So, you know, they do lean into the unknown, but there is some level of analysis there, just for the sake of understanding that source. But according to them, witnesses heard an announcement that urged visitors not to eat the ice cream or drink the water. However, it's uncertain if this announcement occurred before or after the incident, or, always this happens, whether it even happened at all.
Yep.
So it's just got to be flagged. You know, we don't know, but this has been reported in a few sources that this announcement happened in some way. So here's one of the elements I like so much about this case is because they took it seriously and they immediately got tangible with it. There was no stone left unturned, and because of this theory, health inspectors arrived with police that day. They took samples of the food, took samples of the water, and the Severn Trent Water Authority actually said that there was no contamination that they found in the water. And then the tests on the food itself also seemed clear of contamination.
I like that. I like that there were tests conducted. Roll that out. Still a mystery, so we're not going to get an answer, but I like that. I could, just put that out of mind.
Right. It's not, well, they just didn't look into it, and now we got to go, wait, but why?
Which happens a lot, and it's absolutely frustrating.
It happens so much.
Or we looked into it, and we lost the results.
Yeah. We looked into it, and we shredded the documents. I don't know. Lost the skull in the mail. No, they went to the local gym, and they said, stop slanging and banging, you scientists. Get over here.
Yeah. Test the water.
They flexed out of their lab coats, put on a new lab coat, and then they assessed the situation.
That's how it's done.
Yeah. So the wrinkle here, beyond the obvious negative test results, and this is the one that kind of came to mind immediately, is that some of the affected children only, by document's sake, ate what they brought or what the school brought. And so mass food poisoning doesn't really make sense if they're not sharing in the communal water or what have you. Least of all the babies. If they're 2 or 3 weeks old, they're not drinking water. They're not eating, cookies and whatnot.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. So I think, to me, food poisoning can be ruled out for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, this is where we want to move into the pesticides. This is a more popular theory. Again, it's one of the leading theories that some sort of pesticide caused this. So farmers nearby the Hollinwell showground were immediately questioned. Again, we're getting that tangible information, baby. And they were questioned about the use of pesticides or even insecticides. Hey, we know you've been here for decades. We know many of you are using the same product over many years, but what are you using? Let's keep investigating. We want to kind of figure it all out. And the closest farmer to the showgrounds actually said that they didn't use any pesticides, nor had they for several years. And then, according to the Nottinghamshire Fire Service, quote, the wind was in completely the wrong direction, end quote. So, if there were pesticides from this farm or from the farms they were talking about, it actually would have been swept up and carried by the wind in the opposite direction rather than right to the kids.
Damn. I really thought that might have been something.
We're still, hold on, we're still in there.
Okay.
But it is a admittedly big wrinkle, but there's still some floaters here, some things settling on the table, so to speak, right? Okay. So the BBC released a documentary in 2003, and they found that a pesticide called Calixin had been sprayed on the field, right, that the children were at the day before the event. Okay, so now we're not talking about the farmers nearby. That wrinkle might not matter. We got something on the field.
Yep.
This pesticide was known to contain tridmorph. Hope I'm pronouncing that properly, but it's a fungicide and it's used to prevent mildew from forming on grasses, basically keep the grass healthy.
Okay.
And it is worth knowing that the World Health Organization designated this chemical as harmful in 1999. So this was 19 years after the event. And when looking into this, I was like, all right, well, what kind of harm? Is it similar to what we experienced? Tridmorph is found to cause skin and eye irritation, and it actually has been banned in the United Kingdom ever since the year 2000. Additionally, under the WHO's 5-level pesticide classification system, it's labeled as a class 2, meaning it's not super hazardous, it's not like carcinogenic perhaps, but they do label it as kind of moderately hazardous. Now, all this said, there's a different governmental entity here that we want to talk about, and that's the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. And in 2006, here's what they said, quote, the agency has evaluated the human health risks associated with tridmorph residues on commodities and has determined that there is a reasonable certainty that no harm will result from exposure to these residues, end quote. What you feeling?
I don't know, I'm torn because then it's like, yes and no, you know what I mean? It's kind of where we're at.
Exactly. So you have the World Health Organization saying, hey, it's harmful in the sense that it can cause skin and eye irritation.
Right.
You don't even want that. On the other hand, you have the EPA saying that residues on commodities, we're not talking about being directly in the field where it's sprayed, but it might be as a residue on a commodity, which is technically slightly different. It's not enough to maybe cause harm. But at the same time, the harm that we're hearing from the World Health Organization isn't passing out. It's not vomiting. It's not smelling or tasting anything. It's not causing blisters. Well, maybe the skin irritation can cause blisters. So it's not fully in line. And so to me, despite it being a leading theory, the jury is still open. So maybe there's a pesticide that we just didn't know about, that wasn't being honestly talked about, right?
Yeah, because then like a chemical is going to give off a certain reaction, you know?
Yeah.
And so it'd be very rare that it gives a reaction that's off something that's like been documented, you know?
Yeah.
And tested. Yeah. Damn. Okay.
Yeah. It's tough. I mean, I feel like there's something there.
Right.
But again, there's that big wrinkle in there. And so it's kind of open. It's still open, but it still makes sense. This episode of Red Web is sponsored by Aura Frames. This Mother's Day, hope you didn't forget it, you can give your mom a phone call and an Aura digital picture frame. I have so many of these in my own house. My mom's got one in her house, so anytime I want to send photos to her, or my whole family, it's the same house, but I'm talking about mom because it's Mom's Day, okay? I send photos their way. I just got married. Boom, photos on the frame, and she can see that anytime. Sometimes I goof around and I send little prank photos, and she'll send them back to me. But it's like a little personal touch, and you always have fresh photos rolling through this frame. I love this thing to death. Aura Frames was named the, quote, best digital photo frame, end quote, by Wirecutter, and it's easy to see why. There's unlimited storage so you can add as many photos, videos, and funny memes as you can find. That's right, you can upload videos as long as 30 seconds, and your favorite live iPhone photos will play right in the frame. The embedded speaker can play audio on demand, and it's so simple to set up. Your mom will have no problems with it. I could figure it out. And it only takes about 2 minutes to do so using the Aura app. By the way, there's no hidden fees or subscriptions. Boom, set it up, get your pictures in there, share the love with your family. And by the way, Aura has a great deal for Mother's Day. For a limited time, listeners can save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off plus free shipping on their best-selling Carver matte frame. That's AURA frames.com. Promo code REDWEB. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. This episode of Red Web is sponsored by BetterHelp. Mental health awareness is growing, but there's still progress to be made. 26% of Americans who participated in a recent survey say they have avoided seeking mental health support due to fear of judgment. When people hesitate to get help, it doesn't just affect them. It can also impact families, workplaces, and sometimes entire communities, depending on what's going on. This is Mental Health Awareness Month. Let's encourage everyone to take care of their well-being and break the stigma. The world is better when people are healthy and happy. One thing I appreciate about BetterHelp is just how approachable it can be. The privacy of doing this in your own home can kind of help you conquer the stigma, so to speak, but also it can be very difficult to talk about your own needs, and finding the right therapist can be difficult, and BetterHelp is a wonderful tool to begin that journey. BetterHelp has over 10 years of experience matching people with the right therapist from their diverse network of more than 30,000 licensed therapists with a wide range of specialties. BetterHelp is fully online, making therapy affordable and convenient, serving over 5 million people worldwide, and you can switch therapists anytime at no extra cost. We're all better with help. Visit betterhelp.com/redweb to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/redweb. This then leads us to the next theory, which is so interesting, though it is also a little thin, right? So multiple news sources at the time have mentioned a theory that radio waves potentially caused this illness. So according to the Fortean Times, there was a Scottish man who contacted the police suggesting electromagnetic waves could have caused whatever this was. And I think, as I read from other reports and other sources, they called the news and said, hey, I saw this mysterious box at a nearby gas station. So police go to check that out. And the Fortean Times actually claimed that this high-frequency transmitter was found nearby the Hollinwell Showgrounds, though it was immediately dismissed after being found. No deeper investigation was necessary, says the police. So we know that there was something kind of pointed at. We know the police went and got it. And so now you can kind of get conspiracy with it. Oh, maybe it was a secret device and they just went mums.
Right. Did the government step in and were like, no. Like, we got to keep this under wraps.
Right. The British Men in Black showed up.
Hey, this podcast has done me. That's exactly where my mind went. I'm like, well, did they really find that it was nothing?
Yeah. Someone with like a 2-foot tall badge showed up and they whipped that out and they said, this is my jurisdiction.
Right.
And the police put their smaller badges away and they said, okay, we didn't see anything. But I don't know. They basically said, I don't know if this is what you think it is. This seems to be a little bit silly. So they kind of dismissed it and moved on. But we have talked about this concept, some of it proven by science, some of it a little bit more fringe. But this idea of waves, both in the form of radiation, but also in the form of sounds, having demonstrable impacts on people. Specifically in the episode on Dyatlov Pass, we mentioned infrasound. And that is where there's a lot of complexities here. I'm going to simplify, but extremely low waves, right? Sound waves, like this inaudible wum, 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 can create this uneasiness in the body. It can lead to panic attacks. It can lead to other psychological impacts. And beyond that, there's other high frequencies like ultrasound, ultraviolet light, X-rays, other things like that, that yes, can be dangerous to humans, can cause tissue damage at high levels. But again, that takes high levels. It also takes a little bit of time for that to manifest. So I'm not writing it off. I'm also not subscribing to it, but it is an element, that people have talked about. So ultimately, it's unclear kind of what sort of waves would have impacted the children, what they would have been exposed to, if anything at all. So overall, this theory, as interesting as it might be, right, it starts to dabble in that conspiracy a little bit.
Yeah, it does.
It does lack fundamental backing information and grounding science. Like, we just don't know enough about whatever that mysterious transmitter was. And speaking of the fun stuff, but also lacking evidence, we got one more to talk to before we get to the next leading theory on this case. And of course, another mention of the 14 times, we got aliens. We got UFOs in the area. Okay.
Again, it's always more so, how do we squeeze this in here?
Exactly.
I'm always super excited to figure out or to hear about how.
Right. What's the twist? What's the angle? And listen, Task Force, you know me. Do I want it to be aliens? Every single time I do. Am I going to just blindly subscribe? I can't. And I won't. I have to analyze it, because if aliens are there, I want to know how and why.
Yeah.
I can't just go, they are, and that's it. Not every bump in the night can be a ghoul, even if I want it to be.
Yep.
Okay, so in past episodes regarding some pretty vivid UFO encounters, we've had people encountering strange smells, strange tastes, especially the metallic taste in the mouth. But beyond that, this theory is a little thin. There was, a week after this incident, a report in the Daily Telegraph that police were investigating a UFO that had been spotted landing in a nearby field. Now, this could be a separate incident. It could be related. I also remember reading about some reports of people seeing a mysterious aircraft days prior to the event. I think in some sources it was quoted as airplane, but it was like a strange airplane. So was it a UFO alien, or was it truly an unidentified flying object, but of man-made kind?
Probably an unidentified flying object, right? Like of man-made kind. Because if everyone's like, well, that's the shape of an airplane. Not to say that aliens can't mimic a plane if they are able to traverse the galaxies or have a spaceship that's like an airplane. But if everyone's like, that's the shape of a plane, I just don't recognize it. Then it's like, all right, you just haven't seen it yet. It's not like a mass-produced plane.
If it looks like a plane and it tastes like a plane, it might be a plane.
Yeah. Also, lack of social media.
Yeah.
Right? Like if new planes were to come out right now, you'd see it all over social media. So you're already seeing it. You're already hearing about it. But back then, they would just send them up. Hey, new plane. Here we go. We're gonna roll them out.
Absolutely. That's maybe the fundamental difference. And that's one way to look at this. I know I'm cutting out a lot of nuance. We've talked about these in other episodes. So the nuance is there in our backlog, but cutting out the nuance, right? Maybe that's the difference between the mid-50s UFO explosion because of these classified aircraft being seen and last December's drone scare, where we got New Jersey drones and German drones and California drones and all these drones, because they're all shared on social media. Now we're starting to look at them and question them and Yeah, maybe that is a fundamental difference in how we imbibe and interpret these strange things in the sky. But yeah, I wanted to mention it because it is on the table. I'm fascinated by it, but it does feel very thin for this particular case.
Yeah.
Which now brings us to the other leading theory, and honestly a bit divisive at the time. The idea of, and this was proposed at the time, hence the nomenclature of mass hysteria. In modern times, we refer to this as mass psychogenic illness. We talked a whole lot about this in the episode on the dancing plague, where people were literally dancing themselves to death.
Right.
They started dancing, and this happened. They were dancing, they couldn't stop, and many of them would collapse. And as reports say, many of them then died. So, according to Healthline, MPI, if you're not familiar with the term, it refers to, quote, an outbreak of unusual and uncharacteristic behaviors, thoughts and feelings, or health symptoms shared among a group of people, end quote. So this theory simply posits that one or two kids might have actually been sick or passed out. Maybe the stress of the day, maybe it was actually hot and the heat got to them and they passed out. Maybe anything else could have happened. Maybe localized food poisoning, right? It could have actually happened to one or two people. And that their fellow students also standing for an hour and a half might have seen this, and it might have led to a kind of panic and a spread of these symptoms. So now other kids and parents are all falling prey to this.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been like a placebo effect type thing, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Someone's hysterical, freaking out, and then also someone's like, I too feel like I'm short of breath. I see that they're short of breath. I think I'm feeling it as well. And then their body starts becoming actually short of breath, etc. And then everyone else is panicking because, I mean, if you do see a handful of kids falling down and over, everyone's going into a spiral. Everyone's going into a spiral in their own way. And then from there, can mimic.
Totally. And I think what adds a lot more color to this picture is the Daily Telegraph's report on this. They said that there was a sporting event that was held the very same day, later on, in the same field. So we talk about that localized pesticide happening in that field, and at that event, no one got sick. So that indicates to me, despite the pesticide, which still sounds interesting, that this is very much a localized cause or a localized incident rather than something in the field or something happening around the field.
Yeah, because if it was, it wouldn't just stop there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, regarding the pesticide, this kind of, again, it adds more context here, but Professor David Ray of the University of Nottingham actually told the Hucknall Dispatch that Tridemorph can smell similar to bleach. And maybe this sickly smell was present in the air, but maybe Tridemorph wasn't the cause of the other symptoms. So he's basically saying, what if one or two students, in combination with standing up for an hour and a half, smelled this sickly smell from the pesticide, and it was a combination of them smelling that and them passing out, but then mass psychogenic illness is what stepped in to spread it from there, right? Maybe it's a little combo hit here.
Dang. Yeah, and that would make it a mystery. That would make it very difficult to pinpoint, because how do you really ever pinpoint that? You know what I mean?
Right. Especially with it being apparently so divisive at the time. People didn't want to believe that that was the cause. They were like, well, we have to be able to point at something, some causal thing. Mass psychogenic illness, that doesn't ring a bell. Psychology, nah, it's got to be poison, right?
Right. Dang. Yeah, and then like, if people accept what's happening to them as their truth, then that's their truth.
Totally. So adding more to this, he said to the Nottingham Post, quote, the weather, the fact that some children had been awake since 3 a.m. could all have been factors. It would only have taken one or two of the children to react by panicking, and that reaction could have spread very quickly. It's usually the smell of the pesticide which triggers the reaction, end quote. So yes, maybe pesticide was part of the picture, but more as the trigger to, again, this idea of dominoes, right? And to me, having been a young boy, stood in a hot field for long periods of time before, I know that kids are prone to maybe locking their knees. It takes, even as an adult, I know you have a standing desk. There's a healthiness to it because it works your back and your legs, and there is effort there.
Right.
And so I was like, listen, what happens if a child is locking their knees for like an hour and a half?
Yeah,
Yeah, you're stood upright. I'm doing some simple Googling, and this is the power of the 2020s versus 1980. Right. But some of those symptoms were like feeling lightheaded, maybe passing out, feeling weakness, all of those things that are very similar to what a lot of people experienced. And so maybe it's a combination of everybody being tired, everybody standing still for a long period of time, especially if they're carrying a heavy instrument and locking their knees. It doesn't explain that numb limb feeling, feeling like you lost the control of your arm. It doesn't explain the taste. But again, maybe the smell or the taste was the pesticide. It's hard to say. But combining all of this, others theorize that perhaps the announcement was the thing that really set it off. This idea that, hey, don't eat the ice cream, don't drink the water. You're feeling sick, you're smelling things.
Right.
Trust me, I've been there in some way. I can see all of it lining up to create this perfect storm of, I don't feel good, Mr. Stark, and you collapse.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're essentially planting a seed in someone's head.
Yes.
Yeah. And then from there, it's just like, go back to the beginning. Kids are waiting like an hour and a half. It's not particularly hot, but they're standing there. That gets tiring. Kids only have so much energy.
It doesn't really even need to be hot out if you're just stood under the direct sun.
Right.
Or stood still at all, man.
Yeah, it's
We
enough.
had to do the thing where if you moved, you lost points. And so a fly comes by and tickles your nose. There's a psychological torture to this thing, man.
Yeah, that's true.
But I look back both fondly on those memories and also, man, I'm glad I don't have to do that anymore.
Exactly.
But it all just stands to me as like, okay, maybe this is simple explanation, just like the dancing plague. Maybe it's more intrigue at the top, but easily understood once you dismantle it and kind of start to dissect it. But the only wrinkle I can think of, and this is trusting sources, right, is that, again, I don't know if babies, least of all babies that are 2 to 3 weeks old, are cognizant enough to go, they're all passing out. I better grow some blisters on my legs.
Right. Yeah. That doesn't work like that.
So ultimately, yes, to me personally, it seems like the perfect storm of small things that led to a wild headline-grabbing phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
That can likely be explained by mass psychogenic illness, though again, the cause officially remains technically unexplained, and the world is filled with mystery lovers and conspiracy lovers alike that want to fill those gaps with intriguing answers, and sometimes the answer is more boring than you want it to be, but it doesn't stop it from being an intriguing mystery.
No, not at all. That is a mystery. And one I don't think we'll ever find out.
Yeah.
I don't, some mysteries, very little, possibly, arguably. Or it's like, oh, maybe one day technology will come out, we'll figure that out, or maybe someone will step forward, etc. But like, this will remain a mystery.
I mean, even if the task force abroad wants to subscribe firmly to the mass psychogenic illness theory, which is totally valid, it's so interesting that our minds work like that. I know we're built as a social entity. We have societies as far back as we can recall, and we were the cavemen, so to speak, but I find that so fascinating that we're so in tune with one another that this is something that can happen. So even if it is answered by that, there's something so deeply fascinating even by that answer, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but this has been the Hollinwell Incident, and I want to say the red web stamp of answered can be stamped on this one, and we can file it away. But as always, week after week, we have to file it back into our thick folder. Listen, we have so many filing cabinets now of unsolved.
Just warehouses full of them.
Just warehouses filled and then one small dusty desk.
Damn. That's a solid mystery.
It is a solid mystery. Task Force, as always, we want to hear your theories over in our Discord. If you want to know how to join, head to redwebpod.com. Support us directly over there. Get some exclusive, some bonus. We have things rolling out at least every week just for you guys supporting us directly. So thank you all so much for that support. And if you want to know other ways to support us, you can review this show 5 stars wherever you listen to us. It boosts us. We have seen the fruits of those reviews. Someday we'll look at those reviews and maybe, I don't know, Fredo and I have talked about doing a little show where we read your reviews, almost like a fan mail kind of thing.
I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, so let us know what you guys think. And also, store.redwebpod.com if you want to gear up, get some shirts going. But with that said, Fredo, I'll see you right back here next Monday for yet another mystery.